Hey, it's Joe. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to share my reaction to HBO's The Last of Us Episode 1. This is the series premiere, and I believe it did 4.7 million last Sunday. I'm really excited for Episode 2, which is coming out tonight, the date of this recording. But I wanted to go through the first episode. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to see it. If you haven't, there will probably be spoilers in this, so turn this off, go watch it, and then come back. And I'm just going to kind of go through different scenes that I liked and talk about each one.
That was something you described in your book.
Yes, a new virus in Madagascar, say, could be in Chicago within a matter of weeks, and we end up...
All right, so the way they opened up the series with this 1968, I guess it's supposed to be like a interview with some virologists? That's hard to say. Virologist? I think that's right. Anyhow, I'm not one, as you can tell. The way they opened up this episode, I thought was an interesting way to try to set the stage of what's coming. I'm not sure why in 1968. Maybe they just wanted to show space between someone predicting something bad happening and then something bad happening. Spoiler, something bad happens. I liked John Hannah in this. So I first saw him in The Mummy with Brendan Fraser back in the 90s or early 2000s. He was the brother of the main actress, Rachel Weisz. I forget her character's name. Anyway, he was really funny in that and really good. It's really cool to see him in this as well. Obviously, years later, still has that wittiness and charm, I think, that we all liked in The Mummy. So they're explaining everything that happens here. Basically, fungus is going to ruin your life. Here he gives this kind of foreshadowing of if global warming happens and fungus mutates or evolves in a way that it can survive warmer temperatures, then it could survive living inside of us, at least the cordyceps and a few of the other ones that he mentioned in this interview. Let's keep going.
We'll be back.
So don't skip this intro, because it's beautiful and it's really cool. And I noticed the map of the United States in here lights up at, I think, just after this point. So it's pretty neat how it shows fungus spreading. And then, of course, the United States showing that it spreads from there and across the globe. I thought that was really cool. HBO's always got the best like intros, like Westworld, Boardwalk Empire, Game of Thrones, so many, right? The music is amazing. They used Gustavo in this, as well as he was the composer in the game. And then I guess another guy, it shows up here in a second, who also did a lot of the treatments to bring it into the television series. So kind of expanded on it and filled in some gaps from what I understand. So note that opening scene, if you have the subtitles on, it says a song by Avril Lavigne. Definitely was. I was trying to figure out where it was from. Typical 2003 music, right, for a teenage girl. I don't understand the 2003 thing. The game was set up in 2013 as Outbreak, and that was the year the game came out, which makes sense for the game. And I'm not saying it needs to be 2013, but I don't understand why 2003. Maybe it explains it later. In my mind, I think if they had just done current year or not really specified a time at all, or you can kind of guess when the outbreak happened and what year based on clues that you see post-pandemic. In the Left Behind DLC, you're playing as Ellie with Riley and you're in a photo booth. And it's actually not a scene, it's a playable part, and it asks you if you want to upload to Facebook. And at that point, you can actually upload it to your Facebook, but of course, it doesn't work in the game part, like for the reaction of Ellie, and they don't even know what a Facebook is. And I thought that was really funny, showing the difference there of like how superficial some of the things are that we take so serious. Like people's lives live on Facebook and Twitter, and people get canceled and kind of all that stuff that happens. But this kind of showed it as a trivial matter. Like they're like, what's a Facebook? And I think Riley says, I think it's a book where you put your face in it. And it's just really funny because it's like, yeah, like if a pandemic happened, granted our pandemic wasn't this severe, so social media still survived, so we had that as an outlet. But it was really funny to see them like it doesn't even matter to them because first of all they didn't know about it, and second of all, if you explain that to those characters, they probably would have laughed because they're like, really, like that's what was important to so many people. So I thought 2003, sorry, I kind of went on a rabbit trail. 2003 didn't really make sense to me because now you don't have any social media really. I guess you have MySpace. Yeah, MySpace would be the only like callback, and some of the early like Foursquare, I think, or whatever. I can't even remember some of the ones back then. You don't even have that. So the world that they're showing us doesn't necessarily even resonate with a lot of the viewers because they probably never knew 2003. And I'm not saying it has to. I'm just saying that I feel like you could have had some easy wins with connections if it took place in a present day scenario. All the technology would have made sense to people. It would have resonated as like, oh, if I lost my smartphone. That's another thing. Smartphones wasn't really a thing either, as you see, as an old Nokia. Now, as a older person, I like those throwbacks too. It just seems strange. It just seems strange to set it in 2003 and not a present day. From what I understand, is no reason at all other than maybe cost savings. It was probably cheaper to get mid-2000s vehicles and dirty them up and bash them up than it was to get 2023 vehicles. Of course, you could have done 2013, so why not do the game year? Like, I understand a lot of reasons for changing different things of the show, and I'm not trying to hold it to keeping it with the game, but there's some things that I'm just like, why? Out of curiosity, not because I could do any better or because it is some philosophical reason. But anyhow, I digress.
Sorry.
I was gonna make you birthday pancakes. I swear.
You know, I don't really like pancakes.
I know you don't like them. It's for my benefit.
So I love this scene because unlike the game, we really get to understand Sarah and Joel's relationship. It kind of expanded. So we get a little bit more of the interaction. You get to see Tommy come over, which is not shown in the game. In the beginning scene, it's just a phone call and everything's kind of happening, which makes sense because they're trying to get you in the hands of Sarah and moving her around and things like that. But this was a really cool scene. And also the mention about pancakes. And then later on, they talk about cake. And if you remember, if you ever played the game, if you go back, one of the newspaper articles when you're playing as Sarah in this very beginning part, it talks about crops being possibly ridden with the fungus or it coming from crops from the south. And I believe it had some mention of wheat. So maybe the pancake mix, the neighbors, the Adlers, later on, they are eating biscuits and they offer them and they don't eat them. Sarah's around when they're making cookies and she doesn't eat one because they're raisin and she's like, meh, turns her nose up at that one. So I thought that was really interesting that they kind of teased this idea that in the opening scene, nobody in the Miller family anyway eats anything with wheat in it. So I thought that was strange. I think Tommy pulls out some wings. Maybe they were breaded, but they might not have been. Granted, not every wheat would be tainted, and those are old wings he pulls out of the fridge. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I've kind of gone down a few Reddit rabbit holes, and so these aren't necessarily my original thoughts, but I've read these and I thought they were really interesting and just wanted to share. So this is great foreshadowing as well, because in this scene, Sarah notices the twitching arm, and I don't know if that kid was just kind of twitching to stay awake or twitching to some rhythm as they were escaping. I know I used to do like drum patterns and stuff in school just to make the time go by. And then the cough, which once again, having subtitles on is kind of cheating because you might not have even noticed someone coughing because it's just noise, like background noise. But when it says student coughs, I immediately started thinking, oh my gosh, like this is all setting up like as someone who knows what happens, and they pretty much tell it in the trailer, a pandemic happens, and they also, talked about it in that interview leading up. But as someone who knows what happens, you're just paranoid because you're like, someone's coughing, someone's shaking. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen?
That's it?
Okay, 30.
I liked the watch shop scene where she goes and gets it fixed. In the game, she gifts a watch. That's kind of a special moment in the game. This is really cool because it just expands on something that exists in the game without trying to duplicate the game. This is one thing that I really love Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann doing in this show, is that they're not trying to just duplicate the game for the game's sake as fan service. They're taking things that are core to the story, expanding on them, or telling them in a different way, but in which pays tribute to the story. And this is really cool storytelling from an adaptation standpoint. So this scene is interesting. I believe there's a Lebanese flag, so we're just going to assume they're from Lebanon, the shop owners. Earlier, it talked about Jakarta having some issues with people getting sick. That was on the radio while they're having breakfast. And in this scene, I imagine they have family still in other countries, possibly Lebanon. And it looks like they've caught wind of something going on that's not right, as kind of like an early warning system. Interesting fact. That's a serious rabbit hole and probably not relevant at all. Not going to go down that one. So this scene here is awesome. I loved this part where the Grandma Adler is starting to twitch in the seat while Sarah is looking for a DVD, which if you played the games, Joel was really into like terrible action movies and stuff, and it kind of was sprinkled throughout, even his relationship with Ellie later on. There's a lot of movies involved and kind of like their pastime. And I really liked that being in this with Sarah, and also the twitching grandma behind her while she's looking. Like, you just know something's happening. You had the student coughing. You had the possibly infected student with his wrist twitching. You had the issues with Jakarta on the radio. And then you had the watch repair shop, the Lebanese couple who closed early because something was going on that they just couldn't describe, that was just horrible. And then you had the police cars running around, and Miss Adler being kind of clueless, like not watching the news, not really paying attention. Anyway, I just thought it's so good because you know something's going on and you want to just scream like, hey, turn on the news, get out of here now. Like, you can still save this. But we know, those of us that played, and if you've seen the trailer, you know that nothing's going to save them. Like, the pandemic's going to happen and it's going to suck. But anyway, this scene with her twitching behind her is just so good. Like, oh, so creepy. Creepy. This right here, the dog being an early warning, like detection thing. Like, I love it. I don't know. I would say it's kind of cliche, but I like it. So I'll let it slide. In other movies, I can think of Signs with Mel Gibson. The dog's kind of knowing something was up with the crop circles and the aliens. Spoiler. I like this because I don't know if it's happened a lot since I can remember in like Signs and a few other movies. So it's probably been a good amount of time since I've seen a movie use the kind of dog early detection that something's up. But I love this here because it's not overt. Like, the dog almost looks concerned, which is an old lady. That might be normal. Like, the dog might be worried because she's not moving. But we know because of that scene prior with Sarah that she's moving, but in a very animated way, I guess you could say. And I just love this dog just being like, yo, something's up with this lady.
Besides, it's the thought that counts. And you were never going to do it for yourself, so.
I love the way Joel looks back at her when she says, and you were never going to do it for yourself. Pedro does an excellent job of conveying without having to say a word that means a lot to him, that he's working so hard probably to take care of her. Actually, we do know that because earlier he did a double on his birthday. It looks like he's a single parent. Obviously, Tommy's around, but not all the time. And I just like the way that when he looks back, it's such love coming from Pedro's performance here of thank you for taking care of me. I work so hard to take care of you. I don't really think about myself, and it really means a lot. I imagine it really means a lot when the person you work so hard to take care of does something in return when you don't expect it. And a parent-child relationship, you don't really think of your child taking care of the parent at this early age, but she's doing that and she sees that. She's perceptive and she understands. So I just love that moment. It's just really beautiful.
Thank you.
Further instructions.
When I first saw this, that made me jump.
Mercy, please.
Mercy doesn't want to go.
Mercy!
I've had my dog back out of a collar like that. It wasn't because there was a pandemic. This is creepy. So, at first, when I first saw this, I just thought that was hair. But now, looking back at it the second time, and now this is the third time, I guess those are stalks, like fungus stalks, coming out, which I would say that's new. That wasn't in the game as an early infection, that they would have things coming out of their mouth already. But I like it, and I'm not complaining that it's different. And it's creepy as heck seeing this old lady killing her daughter and I guess drinking or feeding on her blood and flesh. Run, Sarah. Oh, gosh, it's so creepy. So the way that she like popped up off of the off of the porch, like her head, oh my gosh, that got me. Oh, it's so creepy.
You take 70.
I love that part because you can see them running to eat the other person that wasn't infected yet. And this is really cool. This whole scene here is really neat because in the game you play in the perspective of Sarah looking around in the back seat. And I felt like they captured that really well here because at times you're in just her perspective from the back seat looking, and it just really adds suspense.
Some kind of parasite.
Is it from terrorists?
So that line, "Is it from terrorists?" is one thing with the 2003 reference that really makes sense because that time, post 9/11, that was only 2 years. Everyone that I knew, I was probably, 13, 12? We were all kind of paranoid of a biological attack from terrorists or something happening from terrorists, especially after 9/11, and then anthrax. So anthrax was a big deal. Everyone was getting like these letters with powder in them, and they weren't sure if it was anthrax. I think there were some that were actual anthrax, and then there was a few copycats just sending like flour and stuff. There was just this hysteria, or not hysteria maybe, but like paranoia that something was going to get us and it was going to be biological. So I like that they gave that call back here. They clued it in with George Bush picture while in Sarah's school. He was up on the wall reminding you that this is 2003, so he was still president. It was post 9/11. And then with the "is it from terrorists" line, I thought was really good for those that were alive during that time. That was a very valid question because it was all over the news that a terrorist attack would be biological, possibly.
God. It's Jimmy's place.
I love the burning farmhouse in this. That was in the game. I believe it was on the right side of the road, though. Maybe, I can't remember. But Sarah's point of view, looking out of the car, burning building, is a great callback to the game because you have the choice to look at it or not as Sarah. And like most people probably, I know I did, I panned to it and tried to do like a movie-esque pan while looking at it while we drove by. That's something in the game when all you can do is kind of look around. It's really fun to kind of like create your own film. And I love that they did this as well. And it reminded me of playing the game and kind of that fear and joy of playing the game during this opening part. It was really a neat throwback. Once again, Sarah's POV here. It's just awesome. I love this airplane crash here. It's amazing. Now, it's dark, so who knows like how accurate that crash was, but I loved how it felt really real, especially the use of practical explosion in that scene, which a lot of this show is practical effects. A lot of the sets are practical. They apparently built that city block just for this show. And later on, you'll see like in Boston and stuff, they actually bought houses in Calgary where they were filming the show and just destroyed a bunch of houses they bought to set them up to look post-apocalyptic. So I loved that it was very real sets. I don't believe any use of the volume or anything like that, like you would see in Mandalorian and other shows. I don't think that any of that was used. It was very practical, very much shot. And I heard on a podcast that they would take a month to do each episode, and they shot it over an entire year, which they did that in order to capture seasons, I believe, which is really cool because it just goes to show the level of detail and care taken for this adaptation. And back to that plane crash, I don't know, just something about it was really good. Like I just liked the way that it came down and crashed and exploded. It just felt really real and raw. So that guy, that performance is awesome. I hope he had pads on underneath his clothes because it looked pretty legit that the dude was diving into that stuff. And I like how they showed these runners, and that's what they're called in the game, runners having very strange motor skills. So like they can do stuff, but they're not coordinated. And when they're locked onto something, they just kind of flail towards you, which I really liked that. And I think it was I Am Legend, kind of similar but more aggressive, and a lot of zombie movies back in the day used to be very slow, Walking Dead type stuff. I liked this because it shows in the very beginning when it's first starting that they have a lot of energy, they can move really fast, but they're not very smart, and it's the fungus just kind of controlling them, trying to spread fungus to more hosts, and it's just whatever it can do to throw itself at a new host. This scene is tragic. I am not going to play it because you should watch it on your own, because I will probably tear up, because every time I've watched this scene I tear up. I will say Pedro's performance and Nico Parker and Tommy, gosh, what's his name? Is it Louise? I forget his name, the actor. But anyway, the actors in this scene are amazing, and the desperation of Joel in this scene is amazing. He latches onto a phrase, I know, and at first I was kind of confused by that, but then it made sense. What do you say? You want to say something, but you're not sure what to say. And I like that in this, Joel is just saying, look, I know it hurts. I know all these things that's happening. And the best way I can say that I'm here for you and that I care for you is that I know. I liked that they showed the desperation of him trying to fix it. And then Tommy just says Joel's name when he's like calling out to him. He's like, Tommy, help me. And Tommy's like, look, dude, you can't do anything. And Joel doesn't want to accept that. And then at the very end, it kind of hits him and he holds her close and just starts breaking down. And it is so well done. This scene here is great. They show post-apocalyptic Boston. We get the first sight of the quarantine zone. And this little boy character is great at just showing us how FEDRA, which is like the military agency in charge, is handling things. It shows that they're human, that they don't want to euthanize the kid. It introduces the scanner, and it shows a red screen, and then they euthanize the kid. So it's like, now the scanner red is bad. It means they're infected. And you can see when she's talking him down right before they give him the injection that she looks like she's about to break. And I thought that was really good at showing that these soldiers are having to do this every day, and it's it's not free on their emotional psyche. There's a cost, and it's hurting her to describe to him and try to make him happy, basically lying to him right before they kill him because he's infected. What else can they do? There's no cure. And I thought that was just really well done. Later on, they show us other examples of FEDRA, which are your typical, like, selfish in a way because everyone's just doing whatever they can to survive. So they're doing some smuggling, some backdoor dealings, anything they can do to kind of take away the pain of their current existence because it's fairly miserable. This quarantine zone in this post-apocalyptic world. There's some really cool symbolism in this scene because the last time we saw Joel, this is 20 years later now, he was holding someone about that age just like that. And we also saw him earlier putting Sarah to bed, cradling just like that. And this is showing that Joel is broken and numb because the other person couldn't put that dead boy in the fire, but he could because he can compartmentalize and block it out, and he's kind of numb to it, so he can do that, which is a completely different Joel than the one just a few moments ago in the show, breaking down, crying, holding someone just like that had died. So I liked what they did here with Robert because I understand in the game why the whole Robert thing existed, was to teach you how to play, but I really didn't like that as part of the story in the game. So in the game, you're chasing down Robert. He had jumped Tess, similar to like what they're showing in the show, but you kind of go hunting for him and you learn. It's a tutorial of how to play the game in this process. So I understand the justification for it, but as far as the story goes, it felt kind of empty. You're chasing down this dude, you want your stuff, he's supposed to give you stuff, he sold it to someone else. When I was thinking about it, like from an outsider's perspective, if you play the game, it just seemed strange. And I had absolutely no care in Robert and that whole little sequence. I did care about learning how to play and moving on, but it just felt strange. And I like in the show, they changed that around a little bit. The battery that Robert sold to someone else, it turns out it was the Fireflies, and Joel needs the battery because he's trying to find Tommy, which is also a departure from the game. So I understand like the whole Tommy aspect makes Robert more important, which I like what they did here because it felt like they kind of fixed something that was in the game that was a little strange because, I mean, they're smugglers and like one bad deal, like I guess that's how they were living in the quarantine zone, that they would hold a grudge and want to go after him and all that, sure. But adding the Tommy element here really made a difference. And granted, I still felt like it was a little weak, but it does set up the meeting with the Fireflies similar to the game. So I understand it has to happen, but I just wonder if there was any other way they could do it and set it up in a way. It's an interesting problem to solve. And it's probably just me who feels this way. But anyhow, I like the way that they set this up with Robert and Tommy being the catalyst for needing the battery and needing this deal with Robert to actually happen.
Now your shit has pretty much ruined my week. And I'd like to go home and drink till my face stops hurting. So are we good?
I love her performance. Tess, the actress who plays Tess, gosh, I forget her name. But I love her performance here. She's obviously the boss, and from this scene, you can tell she controls Joel to an extent, and he's got this raw kind of rage that Robert's scared of, and Tess is promising to protect Robert from Joel, which is pretty interesting, showing the dynamic between Tess and Joel. So this introduction of Ellie is pretty good. We saw a little bit of this in the trailer and the other teaser promos. It felt like they explain later, but it felt like coming into this as your first introduction to Ellie, a lot of things don't make sense. Why she's so hostile, why she's upset. And I know they're just setting you up for later, but I wonder if that might have turned some people off to Ellie initially. And I don't think it's any fault to Bella Ramsey, who's playing Ellie. It just is a weird intro to her, showing that she's, this spunky little kid, which is definitely Ellie, but it just seemed a strange introduction. In the game, your first introduction with Ellie is when you're with Joel to get the cargo that happens to be Ellie, which is very different. And I felt like showing Ellie prior is kind of a cool aspect of the show, but it gave me a completely different vibe about Ellie seeing her here, because while I know that attitude is normal, other people who maybe didn't play the game are probably going to be put off by Ellie, at least initially. They'll warm up to her later, though. I liked how they showed Joel drinking and kind of getting high on his own supply, because it shows that he's not this perfect person. In the intro, you get that feeling with Sarah. It's just a loving father. You don't think of him as being dark. And this is interesting because it shows how he's numbing himself to his current environment, probably to Sarah, probably to the last 20 years. And he's lost and broken. Doesn't seem like he has much to live for, but for some reason he's still alive. So it shows some interesting depth here. You wonder what it is that has kept Joel alive the last 20 years. And what has he had to do to stay alive the last 20 years? And is this part of that with his coping mechanism? I liked this, especially showing Marlene being the boss and in charge. You don't get to see any of that in the game initially. And this is really neat because Marlene is played by the same person who played Marlene in the game as the voice actress. So now she's actually playing her in the role. And I believe, so far that I know, she's the only one from the game that's playing the same character that in the show. There are other people from the game who are playing in this show, but I don't believe any of them are playing the original characters, except Marlene, which is pretty cool.
Greater purpose than any of us could have ever imagined.
So this was an interesting departure from the game because Ellie in the scene has obviously never met Marlene. And Marlene reveals to her that she put her where she was as an orphan because she was trying to protect her, that she promised her mother, and kind of all this backstory that you get a little bit in the game. But in the game, Ellie knows who Marlene is. It's just interesting, and I wonder if that was just to have this scene to be more meaningful to Ellie and to set up more her situation. I'm not sure. It's an interesting departure from the game, but it doesn't take away from the story at all. So I still enjoy it. Whoever was the effects people, I love the practical effect of this infected. It looks just like the game, and it is so well done.
Sorry.
I can do it. Kim, you don't have a fucking ear on your fucking head, could you please? There's a team of fireflies.
That is so funny. I love it. Oh my gosh. It's just, I guess it's morbid, but it's just well-placed humor when you need it. It's so good. I love the use of music in this. In the game, music was a huge part of the game, not just the score, but pop culture music. I don't know how you call it, licensed music. But I like in this show, they also do that with this book and kind of the code over the radio. I liked the dichotomy of 80s music being bad, when so much 80s music is like fun and happy, but when they hear an 80s song, it actually means something bad has happened as part of their code. And so I just thought that was really funny.
When was the last time?
Maybe a year. What's it matter?
But you know where to go.
So this scene is great because it shows, while Ellie in the first introduction, she's this feisty kid who seems fearless, but in this scene, it humanizes her a little bit more because she's concerned about leaving the quarantine zone. Looks like she's afraid. And of course she would never say so, but she's asking Joel to reassure her. And Joel reluctantly does, because I guess a part of him is still a parent and he realizes that she's scared. And while he doesn't go very far in his reassurance to her, he does give her that parent reassurance that that she's seeking, and then immediately changes the subject, and then she kind of quits back at him, and they move on. But at just like a slight moment, and this is the beauty of Pedro and Bella's performance, is that without Pedro really saying anything specific, you can see in his face that he kind of switches, and you see the father in him switch on and then switch back off.
Actually outside. Jesus Christ. Oh.
So I liked the humor in that, but I felt like it was uncharacteristic of Ellie. I don't know. Like, isn't it obvious they're sneaking around? Like, that she would just stand up and it just seemed strange. It was kind of off-putting. Like, I know other people probably didn't even care, but to me it just felt strange. It didn't seem like Ellie to do something like that, because she's so smart and intelligent. As far as we know in the game, she's just on point. And for her to just stand up and be like, oh, I'm outside, and while there's a searchlight and she knows that they're sneaking around, it just seems strange to me. So I loved, once again, Pedro's performance here, because you can see in his face, he's so good at telling you things without saying anything. You see that he almost, on his face, you can see the brokenness and desperation as he's replaying that moment in his head with Sarah. And he takes it out on this poor FEDRA agent. But it's not like he just gets blinded with rage. He's physically blinded by the spotlight in his eyes, but you can see that the flashback starts to happen to him, and you can see his face he almost looks broken and upset again, not just angry. And so I thought that was a really subtle way of showing him kind of lose it on this FEDRA soldier, without being just cliche flashback, I'm angry at you because of my daughter type thing. It shows that he really experiences the trauma again, and kind of that PTSD type of episode physically on his face right before he snaps and beats the crap out of him. 80s music. Depeche Mode. Once again, it sounds kind of happy, but Depeche Mode was always really good at happy sounding songs being kind of depressing if you listen to the lyrics. So I kind of liked this one. I liked, once again, the use of the music. And it makes you wonder, is that Bill and Frank sending the signal to him? Or is that Tommy sending the signal? So you kind of wonder who's saying there's trouble and why. And in the game, Joel's not looking for Tommy. They'd kind of gone their separate ways because of a fight. So I don't know if that fight still happened and Joel's just worried about Tommy. Maybe he stormed off and now he's worried about him, or I guess they'll explain it. But I don't know exactly who's in trouble or what, but it's pretty cool. And of course, it's that classic cliffhanger to make you come back for episode 2, which as of this recording is tonight. So I'm really excited for episode 2. So thanks for joining, and I'll probably do this after every episode. I'll try to get it out before the following episode comes out, but if not, it'll come out. Don't worry. I enjoy kind of going through this, and if you all enjoy it, just say something in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I love this IP. I love The Last of Us, obviously, and I promise I'll do other games and shows, but right now this is kind of big and relevant, and I really enjoy it, so I'm just kind of covering this, both gaming and with the TV show. That's all, folks.